Hello everyone, this is Zane, and because the video I did of the response to the Off the Rope show, who is better, Flair or Hogan, I thought I'd do one more. And this is my debate. Who is better? Is it Piper or is it Jericho? Now let's get into this debate of who is better. Now, this is kind of difficult because you are looking at two different people from two different eras. You have Roddy Piper, who came during the golden age of wrestling, and then you had Chris Jericho, who was basically coming up during the time when the second coming of WCW and during the time of the Attitude Era. So it's very difficult to kind of compare the two. But the thing is that I've seen is that their styles are very similar. You have Chris Jericho, who was considered a cruiserweight in the WCW. Then he went to WWE/WWF, right around the time when he switched to WWE. A little bit before that. And the thing is that his style was similar to Piper. He would be considered like a middleweight. He isn't a heavyweight, neither man are. They're in the 210 to 230 range of weight. So they're not heavyweights. They're similar to what cruiserweights would be. Back when Piper's time was, he wouldn't be considered really a big guy. So he would be considered like, if it was in the 90s, a cruiserweight. He would not be that big size guy. He would go after the Intercontinental Championship or the U.S. Championship, similar to what Chris Jericho would do. He would go after the Cruiserweight or the U.S. Championship or the IC title, like what Shawn Michaels did before he actually got the WWF World Championship. They're very similar. Look at their gimmicks. You had Piper hitting the Piper's Pit, the first person to do it. But then you have Chris Jericho later, he did the highlight reel, which, if you look at both shows, the highlight reel and the Piper's Pit, their formats are very similar. You got two characters in Jericho and in Piper who are highly charismatic. They can bring the people in to the seats. They can bring people to being surprised in their promos, surprised in their guests, surprised what they do to their guests. What you have with Piper, who basically knocked a coconut against Superfly Jimmy Snuka's head, and then you had Chris Jericho, who had several different type of people on the shows where they had fights on it. You had when, in 2005, John Cena had switched from SmackDown to Raw with the U.S. Championship, I believe, at the time, and basically beat the hell out of Christian and his partner. I can't remember who his partner was at the time. But essentially speaking, you have such similar styles and similar charismatic attitudes. This has to be brought up. Who was better? Was it Piper or was it Jericho? Or is it Piper or Jericho? Seeing Piper when I was young, seeing how really, out of all the most dirtiest heels you can think of Shawn Michaels when he turned heel, you can think of Ric Flair when he turned heel, you can think of Hulk Hogan, the greatest heel that was, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. You know that NWO was one of the best in the world, bro. Like stuff like that. But if you have to think of some of the top 5 worst heels that existed, Piper's up there. He is almost at least maybe the 3rd worst heel in history. I'm sorry, that's what my belief is. Because you got Hulk Hogan, who was one of the biggest heels there was. And then you have Buddy Rogers. I believe he was a very good heel. I wouldn't say he was in the top 3, the top 5, but he's certainly in the top 10 when he turned heel. You have basically Ric Flair, he was a heel, and a very damn good heel. He would be in the top 5. But you got to say Piper's one of the top 5 best heels. Chris Jericho, he was a good heel, but he wouldn't be considered in the top 5. He would be considered in the top 10 by my humble opinion. So in the heel category, Piper wins. If you're talking about faces, I'm not saying Piper couldn't do a good face, but he was more better for his heel work. Chris Jericho was a decent heel and face. He wasn't the top 100 best faces, and he wasn't the top 100, top 10 best faces, and he's in the top 10 best heels. Like in the last 5 years or so, no, 4 years, since 2008 when he did I Am the Best in the World and What I Do. So in the last maybe 3 or 4 years, he's been a very good heel. He could be in the top 10, not fully the top 10, but he's close to the top 10. So I would say Jericho would make a much better heel than Piper. There is no way you can deny Piper. He was not a great face. He was a good face, but not a great one. And I believe Jericho was better. In-ring work. This is interesting. Piper was never known to be a big spot man. He was more of a ground type of wrestler. Not really super technical, but not really to the point where he couldn't do a couple of spots to get people interested. Jericho's always been known to do good wrestling, but also doing a lot of spots, a lot of high risk. Piper wasn't really into high risk. He was more ground, but also more of smash mount type of wrestling. He would hit you into the ground. He would make you suffer. So I could say that Jericho would be better in that respect, but really it's almost like a tie because they're both different styles. And the styles are not really too far off from one another. They both could do long matches, and they both could do short matches. So also I would say in their match work in length of time, making the people more, like I said, more having like a feel of suspense. You don't know what they're going to do next. What are they going to try and pull out of the hat? And with Piper and with Jericho, they're pretty much even because they both could do short and long matches. They both can do suspense either way. It can be short or it can be long. So they're very similar in that respect. When it came outside the ring, how they were perceived, I believe Piper stayed in character a lot more than Jericho did. Because since he did most of his work as a heel, you can see that he was a very good heel in the ring and outside the ring. Not talking about Piper's Pit, when he did his promos. When he did his promos outside the ring, just like Jericho did, I believe Piper did way better in his promos than Jericho, and Jericho was very good in his promos. But Jericho had more variation because he did a lot of heel and a lot of face because he liked to be varied. Piper was not saying he was one-dimensional, but you can say the variation in their promos, Piper wasn't that varied, but Jericho was. When it came to really good, strong feelings of promos, I'd say Piper was better. So variation in promos of heel and face goes to Jericho. Having a more impactful promo, I believe, was Piper. Because it's really clear that Piper was really that strong of a heel. That's what brought him over the most. And if I have to say in this, who's lasted longer? Who's had the most best run in the WWE and any other promotion? Since Piper really, he was, I believe, in the AWA at one point, and then he went to WWF or WWF, and then he went to WWF. They're very similar. The only thing is that Piper's now retired. He's been around for more than 20 years. So he retired already. Jericho, right now, it's a possibility that he will either retire to do Fonzie more, or he'll just retire simply because he just doesn't want to do anything anymore. Because he has been in the business for quite a while. He's been there at least 20 years. Piper's been there, let's be honest, Piper's been there more than 25 years. And he's come back and forth. With Jericho, that's still a question mark. So I can say that Jericho may have a little more staying power in this time, but all around, Piper's had a lot more years. Let's be honest, Piper has done it many more years than Jericho, but since Jericho is still a question that he'll do more years or not, I can't really say Jericho has more staying power or not because he's still active. Piper's already done at least 20, I think he was 15 years old when he first started. So he's done at least maybe near, I don't think 25 years, I think near 30 already. When he retired, I think 2006, I believe, he did his last match in any type of form or capacity. Next to doing cameos, Piper's been around longer. So adding all this up, who is better? This is a difficult one because they're very similar. This is hard. Because Jericho is a question mark if he's finished with his career compared to Piper, which he only does cameos once in an extremely long while or at all. Who? I can't really give a definitive answer right now. It would be easy to just say Piper's better because he's been around longer. He's been a greater heel than Jericho. He was great in his work in his Piper's Pit. He had the most memorable moments over Jericho. And I could leave it at that. But I can't. Because even though Jericho isn't inactive yet, he hasn't retired, he has done some very great things. He worked for the Cruiserweights in WCW. He did, so far, 9 IC title reigns. He's been world champion, and he's been WWE champion multiple times. He's been the first undisputed champions where WCW and WWE belts were merged into one. That was during the time after WCW was bought out by Vince McMahon, and they did the angle of the Alliance. Now, I didn't really see the Alliance angle. Didn't see it. Like I said, I was working a lot, had a bad marriage with a bad wife. I can't really say how great that angle was. I had managed to catch a couple of videos of it, and it looked like it was an interesting angle, but I can't really say it was a great angle. I've heard the videos of other people saying that some people really thought it sucked. Some people thought it was great. So I can't really say how well the angle worked. But I can say during that time, Jericho was very active. He was active around the time how Undertaker was changing his gimmick to basically to the American Badass, when he was still known from working with a lot of great people back in the 90s, when he was in the Covenant, when he's with his son, with his brother Kane. I'm about to say son, sorry. When he's with his brother Kane. And I can't really say that Piper was better. I can say that if after this year Jericho retires, I would say Piper would be better. If he officially retires after this year, permanently, Jericho would not be better than Piper, because all of the foundation of what works for Jericho really was started with Piper, because he would never have the highlight reel if it was for Piper. A lot of his attitude, you can see Piper influence there, and Piper is what probably helped him get along with his gimmicks. But if he doesn't retire, if he comes back maybe in 2013 or maybe somewhere in 2012, I would say that Jericho, if he lasts a couple of more years, would be a very strong contender to beat over Piper, because he still has more years to go. He still can give more variation of his gimmick, and you never know what else he may throw out of his pocket. Come out of his pocket, because Jericho is very good at varying his character. How he had his character in WCW was good. How he had his character during the WWF into the WWE was incredibly good. When he had that first meeting with The Rock, when SmackDown had aired in 1999, when he came out as Y2J, was epic. I'm sorry to bug The Rock when he's trying to basically launch his show. SmackDown's his show. It was based after him saying, "I'm going to put the smack down on every jabroni that's there. Can you smell it?" That stuff. Can't do that well either. But essentially, you could see Jericho still has a long way to go. And nothing against Piper. He's one of my all-time favorites, like Bob Backlund. Mr. Bob Backlund, I'm sorry. Mr. Bob Backlund, he earned that moniker of Mr. Bob Backlund, coming back in 1990 against Bret Hart. But essentially, if you're going to see it like this, Chris Jericho looks like he'll have a good contingency to surpass Piper in several places. Not saying he'll fully pass Piper. I want to make this clear. This is my view of it. He'll never pass Piper in every accomplishment he did. No way. There's very few people I could say ever that can ever surpass Piper. Piper helped make that generation the golden age of wrestling. Next to Hulk Hogan, next to Macho Man Randy Savage, even with Shawn Michaels, he was during that time as well, in the mid to late 80s. Those men basically cemented themselves in the golden age and helped shoot the WWF into the WWE, especially when they went into the Attitude Era. If they didn't have Hogan, Piper, Shawn Michaels, they would not be where they are today. I'm sorry. None of them. If any one of these three, this is what I believe. I'm not taking away from anybody else. I almost forgot Macho Man Randy Savage. Sorry, that's 4 people. You got Macho Man Randy Savage. You got Piper. Definitely need Piper in there. Shawn Michaels, who helped shoot the WWE into the next stages. And Hulk Hogan. Those 4 men particularly helped make the WWE. And helped the WCW as well. I'm sorry. If there was no Hogan, it wouldn't be the WCW having the fight of the Monday Night Wars. Same with Macho Man Randy Savage. You needed those men. You need them. And Piper is one of them. And I say this clearly, that Chris Jericho will not surpass Piper in every place. Ring work, he's not going to... If you're going to be honest, in ring work he probably will surpass Piper because he has variation in his ring work. When it comes to his character and variation, he will surpass Piper in variation. If you're going to talk about the highlight reel compared to Piper's Pit, he's not going to surpass him. He won't. His promo work, some aspects of it, he will surpass him because he's able to vary his character. But he will not surpass him in the sheer power of it. But he'll come close. So, honestly, if I have to say who's better, at this moment, because Jericho is a question mark, I would say at this moment, Piper is ahead. It doesn't mean he wins the battle of the debate, but he is ahead of Jericho. For the simple fact, he's already retired, he's solidified himself already in the WWE and the WWF. He solidified himself even somewhat in the Attitude Era, doing visits in there. He has. So I say it like this. The debate still goes on. Jericho is behind Piper. And that's how I see it. Now, if you like this video, subscribe and comment. I really would like to get this debate going, that knowing which one you believe is better really helps me to understand how wrestling is. I mean, I'm still like an above average fan that knows a lot more than he did before, like I said in my very first video. I'm still learning, and I want to understand how people think. So everybody take care. Have a good night.